Hello and welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to cover various Archaic Proto-Indo-European deities. I am doing this based on scholarly research and my own interpretation based on own research and existing later myths. When it comes to the Archaic Proto-Indo-European frame, this frame particularly refers to the ancient Neolithic frame going back to 5000 BC that underlies the Indo-European cultural frame when it comes to, the pagan Indo-European traditions. As such, we can learn a lot by looking at these particular archaic deities themselves to really shed more light on these deities in later pantheons. Maybe not in the sake of, going all the way back to the Proto-Indo-European frame per se, but very much to shed more light on the later deities. And maybe shed also more light on their connected rituals and connected significance, and how certain deities are interconnected, shedding more light on the individual pantheons, and the purpose not being just a pure scholarly reconstruction for the sake of scholarly research, but for the sake of pagan revival, and serve as a base for others to learn more about the more archaic Proto-Indo-European frame, so we can learn more about the respective archaic deities. As through a comparative mythological lens, we might learn things that we might not see otherwise, and might shed light on certain aspects more tied to a specific pantheon. I will go within the video through these various deities one by one, and within the overview you can see how these are connected to each other in the more archaic sense. Even though it is mainly based on scholarly research, do note that this is my own personal reconstruction, and it thus should be taken as such. Further, per deity, I will also mention who their children are if relevant in the slide. Now, when it comes to the first deity that I'm going to go into, this is Nepōts, the descendant of the waters. And he is a reconstructed Proto-Indo-European deity who dwells in waters and whose power must be ritually gained or controlled by a hero who is the only one able to approach it. And the motive may come from swamp gas rising from swamps and igniting. A wide range of linguistic and cultural evidence attests the holy status of the terrestrial potable waters, venerated collectively as the waters or divided into rivers and springs. The cults of fountains and rivers may have preceded Proto-Indo-European beliefs by tens of thousands of years, but it was also prevalent in their tradition as well. When it comes to this deity, one example would be, for instance, Neptune, but also in a 9th century Norwegian poem by the poet Theodulf, the name meaning grandson of the sea is used as a kenning for fire. Even the Greek tradition contains possible allusions to the myth of a fire god dwelling deep beneath the sea. As such, it has been speculated that the Roman Neptune has been conflated with a Proto-Indo-European freshwater deity, since the Indo-Europeans lived inland and had little direct knowledge of the sea. As such, the Romans may have reused the theology of a previous freshwater god in their worship of Neptune. Servius then also explicitly names Neptune as the god of rivers, springs, and waters. Neptune also being one of only 4 Roman gods to whom it was considered appropriate to sacrifice a bull. The other 3 were Apollo, Mars, and Jupiter. Neptunalia, the Roman festival of Neptune, was held at the height of summer, typically on July 23rd. The date of the festival and the construction of 3 branch shelters suggest that Neptune was a god of water sources in times of drought and heat. Neptunalia was devoted to conservation and the draining of superficial waters. Further, Neptunalia was spent under branch huts in woods between the Tiber and the Via Salaria, with participants drinking spring water and wine to escape the heat. It was a time of merrymaking when men and women could mix without the usual Roman societal constraints, with there also being an added context of agricultural fertility in the festival, since Neptune received the sacrifice of a bull. If we now look at this from a Jungian lens, water is a common symbol representing the unconscious mind, emotions, and the collective unconscious. Having Nepōts dwelling in the waters can then be seen as an embodiment of primordial forces reflecting the depths of the psyche and the mysteries of the unconscious, where the association of H₂ Nepōts with fire are suggested by the interpretation of descendant of the waters as swamp gas igniting, adds another layer of symbolism. Fire often symbolizing transformation, passion, and the light of consciousness emerging from the depths of the unconscious. Further, H₂ Nepōts, together with Neptune, also may parallel the Irish god Nectan, masters of rivers and wells. Nectan is a figure in Irish mythology who is associated with a spring marking the source of the river Boyne, known as Nectan's well or the well of wisdom. He was a husband of Buan, a goddess of the Boyne, Nectan being believed to be another name for Nuada. He is said to inhabit the otherworldly Sit Nectine, the mythological form of Carberry Hill, with water being both necessary but also there being danger associated with water. One can see how such a figure might have been very important to the Proto-Indo-Europeans, and also later within pagan spirituality as well. When it comes now to the next deity I want to go into, this one would be the Hearth Goddess. Scholars generally agree that the cult of the hearth dates back to Proto-Indo-European times. The domestic fire had to be tended with care and given offerings, and if one moved house, one carried fire from the old to the new home. The sacral or domestic hearth can likewise be found in the Greek and Roman hearth goddess Hestia and Vesta, 2 names that may derive from the Pi root Huis, meaning burning. In ancient Greek religion and mythology, Hestia is the virgin goddess of the hearth and the home. In myth, she is the firstborn child of the titans Kronos and Rhea, and one of the 12 Olympians. A Greek custom required that as the goddess of sacrificial fire, Hestia should receive the first offering at every sacrifice in the household. In the public domain, the heart of the Prytaneum functioned as her official sanctuary. Whenever a new colony was established, a flame from Hestia's public hearth in the mother city would be carried to the new settlement. The goddess Vesta is her Roman equivalent. Vesta is the virgin goddess of the hearth, home, and family in Roman religion. She was rarely depicted in human form and was more often represented by the fire of her temple in the Forum Romanum. During the Vestalia dedicated to her, privileged matrons walked barefoot through the city to the temple, where they presented food offerings. Vesta was connected to liminality, and the limen, meaning threshold, was sacred to her. And where the majority of temples would have a statue, that of Vesta had a hearth. And this fire was a religious center of Roman worship. The common hearth focus publicus of the whole Roman people. And the Vestals were obliged to keep the sacred fire alight. If the fire went out, it must be lit from an arbor felix, auspicious tree, which meant most likely an oak. The myths depicting Vesta and her priestesses were, however, few. The most notable of them were tales of miraculous impregnation of a virgin priestess by a phallus appearing in the flames of the sacred hearth. While Vesta was the flame itself, the symbol of the phallus might relate to Vesta's function in fertility cults, but it may be also invoke the goddess herself due to its relation to the fire stick used to light the sacred flame, as she was sometimes thought of as a personification of the fire stick, which was inserted into a hollow piece of wood and rotated in a phallic manner to light her flame. Where H₂ Nepōts and the Hearth Goddess were two of the primordial deities that the Proto-Indo-Europeans saw as important, another one would be both Worunos and Dyēus. Worunos is the nocturnal sky and benevolent counterpart of Dyēus, with possible cognates in Greek Ouronos and Vedic Varuna, from the Pi root Woru, meaning to encompass or cover. As such, Worunos may have personified the firmament, or dwelt in the night sky. In both Greek and Vedic poetry, Ouronos and Varuna are portrayed as wide-looking, bounding or seizing their victims, and having or being a heavenly seat. As such, he may have been a kind of benevolent sky father representing the night, in contrast to Dyēus, the day sky father. In Jungian terms, the night sky can symbolize the unconscious mind with its depths and unknown aspects, where the active, outward-facing aspect of the sky is associated with daylight and consciousness. As the gateway to the gods, Dyēus was a prominent deity in the pantheon. He was, however, likely not their ruler or the holder of the supreme power like Zeus or Jupiter. In that sense, he was more the active, outward-facing side of Worunos, also being linked to the anima mundi in a more ancient sense. The anima mundi being the world soul, representing the intrinsic connection between all living beings, which relates to the world in much the same way as the soul is connected to the human body. Plato similarly said that the universe is a living being. He said in Timaeus, "Thus then, in accordance with the likely account, we must declare that this cosmos has verily come into existence as a living creature endowed with soul and reason. A living creature, one and visible, containing within itself all the living creatures which are by nature akin to itself." There are also similar concepts in Eastern philosophy as well. These include the Brahman, Purusha, and Paramatman of Hinduism, and the Tao in Taoism, where Carl Jung explored the possibility that his concepts of archetypes and synchronicity might be related to the unus mundus, so to this world soul. So in that sense, meaningful coincidence being made possible by the fact that both the observer and connected phenomena ultimately stem from the same source, thus the unus mundus, or in other words, the world soul. Where before now we have talked about both Worunos and the Sky Father, within the overview you can also see the binder god. This is because the Proto-Indo-Europeans, according to some scholars, most likely used the three-sky cosmological model. In this three-sky cosmological model, the celestial phenomena linking the nightly and daily skies is embodied by a binder god, such as the Greek Kronos, a transitional deity between Ouronos and Zeus in Hesiod's theogony. Another example being the Indic Savitar, associated with the rising and setting of the sun in the Vedas, and the Roman Saturnus, whose feast marked the period immediately preceding the winter solstice. This binder god embodies the cosmic forces that link the nightly and daily skies, serving as a bridge between different realms of existence. And from a Jungian perspective, Kronos can be seen as an archetype representing the transition from the unconscious to conscious states, or from one phase of life to another. Kronos, in his tyrannical form, from a Jungian lens, represents a state of overwhelm from the unconscious through a disconnection to instinct, where the need of control is externalized. And even though Kronos' rule might be tyrannical in nature, this rule is mirrored in the afterlife, where Kronos rules over Elysium or the Islands of the Blessed. And as such, the contradictions between tyrant and benign ruler are an essential part of the god's nature, representing both the shadow state as much as the link to Kronos under the rule of Uranus in its original nature, representing the point between both the benevolent Uranus and the potential destructive side of the sky god. An important feast day connected to Kronos is December 17th, and the Saturnalia continued for 7 days thereafter, despite attempts of emperors to shorten it. During this time, his statue that is normally kept bound with rope during the rest of the year was ritually untied on this day. Next to this, social divisions were within acknowledged limits, either abolished or inverted during Saturnalia. The wearing of felt hats representing liberation was also customary for all during the celebrations. And it was also customary to give gifts on the last day. Originally, these were clay heads, likely representing former sacrifices. And these gifts were accompanied by written mottos. Kronos in this form symbolized the return to the Golden Age, thus also representing a return to the primordial ways of being, the more archaic way of being of the early hunter-gatherer people. And as such, the untying of Kronos' statue and the inversion of social norms during Saturnalia represented temporary release of inhibitions and a return to a more primal state. And this release of tension can be seen as a symbolic expression of libido, the psychic energy that drives both creative and destructive impulses. When it comes to the primordial deities important to the Proto-Indo-Europeans, another one would be the Hearth Goddess. She is portrayed as the vast and dark house of mortals, in contrast with Dyēus, the bright sky and seat of the immortal gods. And she is associated with fertility and growth, but also with death as the final dwelling of the deceased. She was likely the consort of the Sky Father, Deus Pater. She is further the personification of the earth, being the ancestral mother of all life. However, there is not much to go on regarding her myths, because in ancient times, Gaia, for instance, was mainly worshipped alongside Demeter and as a part of the cult of Demeter, and does not seem to have had a separate cult. Similarly, with the Romans with Terra Mater as well, she seemed to have been more connected to the soil than to crops or anything of the like, representing the fertile soil. When it comes to one of the children of the Sky Father and the Earth Goddess, this would be the Smith God, who has as his son or creation the three-headed serpent. So although the name of a particular Smith God cannot be linguistically reconstructed, Smith gods of various names are found in most Proto-Indo-European daughter languages. Two motifs recur frequently in Indo-European traditions: the making of the chief god's distinctive weapon, such as Indra's and Zeus's bolt, Luke's and Odin's spear, and Thor's hammer. When it comes to such smith gods, in the Rig Veda, Tvaster is stated to be a skillful craftsman who created many implements. including Indra's bolt, the axe of Brihaspati, and a cup for divine food and drink. The cup for divine food and drink, as seen in various mythological traditions, symbolizes nourishment, abundance, and spiritual sustenance. It represents the quest for meaning and fulfillment, as well as the attainment of spiritual enlightenment. Tvaster is further stated to be the creator of forms, and is often stated to be the crafter of living beings and wombs. Next to this, he is also seen as the guardian of Soma, and his son Vishvarupa is the guardian of cows. The thunder god Indra has a conflict with Tvaster in myth, with him stealing Tvaster's Soma and trying to possess Vishvarupa's cattle. Indra, however, is consistently victorious in the conflict, and Tvaster is stated to fear Indra. In the Taittiriya Samhita and Brahmanas, Vishvarupa is killed by Indra, and in response, Tvaster does not allow Indra to attend his Soma sacrifice. Indra, who is connected to the Maruts and with it to the Koryos, however, steals and drinks the Soma through his strength. In order to have revenge for the murder of his son, Vishvarupa, Tvaster creates a demon called Vritra. Vritra and Vishvarupa most likely being a reflex for the three-headed serpent that guards the cattle. Similarly, Feronia also had a son, Evolus, who has as his Greek counterpart Geryon, both of which who had a triple body and a triple soul, Geryon having one body and three heads, being a reflex of the three-headed serpent stealing the cattle, where Heracles, who by scholars is seen as Trito, retrieved the cattle of Geryon, echoing the Trito myth and the three-headed serpent slaying myth. However, there is more to the smith god than just the three-headed serpent. As I had said, he's also connected to the cup for divine food and drink. And we can also see this as a reflex within Finnish mythology as well, where in Finnish mythology, the Sampo is a magical device or object described in many different ways that was constructed by the blacksmith Ilmarinen, and that brought riches and good fortune to its holder, akin to the Horn of Plenty of Greek mythology. But when the Sampo was stolen, Ilmarinen's homeland fell upon hard times. He sent an expedition to retrieve it, but in the ensuing battle, it was smashed and lost at sea. Now, when it comes to another son of the Sky Father and the Earth Mother, this would be the Thunder God. The Thunder God being called Péhunus in the Proto-Indo-European sense, meaning the striker or the Lord of Oaks, which is a reconstructed name of the weather god in Proto-Indo-European mythology. The deity was connected with fructifying rains, and his name was probably invoked in times of drought. Péhunus was often associated with oaks, probably because such tall trees are frequently struck by lightning, and his realm was located in the wooded mountains. While his thunder and lightning had a destructive connotation, they could also be seen as a regenerative force, since they were often accompanied by fructifying rains. In that sense, the thunder god embodies the archetype of power, strength, and vitality. In his thunder and lightning are potent symbols of both destruction and regeneration. Thunderstorms, with their accompanying rains, symbolize the cycle of death and rebirth, echoing the psychological concept of transformation and renewal. The wife of the thunder god is the sovereignty goddess, and this sovereignty goddess embodies a multifaceted array of roles and characteristics across various cultural traditions and mythologies. When it comes to the Proto-Indo-European version of her, in her sacral function, she is associated with horses, symbolizing strength and freedom, while also overseeing the land, its people, and their prosperity. She weaves the threads of fate and destiny, shaping the lives of individuals and communities, reflecting a deep-seated belief in cosmic order, where in her martial function, she serves as a guardian and advisor to warriors, guiding them through conflicts and transitions, symbolized by crossroads and serpents, where she and her priestesses further also played an important function in deciding when to start or end a war, where as a fertility deity, she is revered as the mistress of animals, ensuring the prosperity of the land and the well-being of women in childbirth, next to protecting the children and looking over them in the afterlife, if they would die early, where her connection to water sources underscores her role in providing life and purification, while her mediation between the living and the deceased highlights her involvement in the cycle of life and death, where through rituals and initiations like the Koryos and Arkteia, she facilitates bonding, community creation, and a connection with nature. Some examples of the sovereignty goddess in later times are Juno, Feronia, and Saranu. To give a few examples I want to go into within this video. But there are many more examples out there as well. Juno, as mother goddess, was connected with the idea of vital force, the fullness of vital energy, and eternal youthfulness. She is allied with the warriors of Mars, and also thus linked to the conquering of enemies. And she herself is also a warrior, linked to fertility and sovereignty. The Lupercalia is also linked to her, led by wolf priests, and the association with wolves may be related to the symbolic role of a predatory animal in male rites of passage. With the Lupercalia also boasting its own priesthood, the Luperci or Brothers of the Wolf, whose establishment and rites were attributed either to the Arcadian culture hero Evander or the shepherd twins Romulus and Remus. The Luperci were typically young men, usually aged between 20 and 30, and within this ritual, the wolf priests who represented ancestors brought purification to the community from the underworld. And this happened within the Lupercal cave, which for the Romans was seen as a passage to this underworld. But we can see this multifaceted nature of the sovereignty goddess also within Feronia. Feronia holding sway over various domains, serving as a deity associated with the underworld, wilderness, fertility, springs, water, nature's vital forces, health, and abundance. Next to that being a Triune goddess, symbolized as mother, virgin, and elderly woman, associated with the three worlds, earth, underworld, and sky, where notably an archaic cult recognized her as Juno the Virgin, where she was paired with a young Jupiter according to Servius. Regarding the element of sovereignty, Feronia also played a crucial role in conferring civil rights upon the people of her tribe and protecting the outcasts, establishing her as a sovereign within her designated realms. And this giving of rights also then made her a figure that guided both outcasts, those living in the wilderness, and later also freed men back into society and as part of the tribe. Varro identified Feronia with Libertas, the goddess who personified liberty. The name Libertas, freedom, is a derivation from Latin liber, meaning free, stemming from a Proto-Indo-European word meaning belonging to the people. Next to this, enslaved people who would sit on the sacred stone in her grove would also be freed. And in this capacity, she guided individuals away from peril and facilitated advantageous circumstances, though she could also be obstructing and dangerous, like a story of when she smites towers that Romans built which were encroaching onto her groves with thunder, showing her confident and protective side. From a Jungian lens, her role in conferring civil rights and guiding outcasts back into society can be seen as a psychological metaphor for the integration of marginalized aspects of the psyche, but also of society, where her use of thunder represents her enforcing boundaries, removing obstacles, and protecting her inner sanctuary. Where finally Saranyu is another good example. She is a Hindu goddess and is mentioned in the Rig Veda. In there, she is mentioned as the mother of the death god Yama, meaning restraint, the goddess Yami, Manu, and the divine twin physicians Ashvins. Where Yami, according to Hindu scriptures, has the power to remove sin. While Yama is depicted as the lord of death, Yami is said to be the lady of life, connected to nature and water. But now going deeper into Manu and Yemo, which is connected to Yama, and the sovereignty goddess as well, as being their children in that sense. Well, Manu and Yemo were a duo in Proto-Indo-European mythology, connected to the creation myth, and in this creation myth, Manu kills Yemo as a foundational part of the origin of the universe. Yemo here is sometimes also interpreted as a primordial hermaphrodite as well. And many Indo-European beliefs explain the origin of natural elements as the result of the original dismemberment of Yemo. His flesh usually becomes the earth, his hair grass, his bones yield stone, his blood water, his eyes the sun, his mind the moon, his brain the clouds, his breath the wind, and his head the heavens. Where the traditions of sacrificing an animal to disperse its parts according to socially established patterns, a custom found in ancient Rome and India, has been interpreted as an attempt to restore the balance of the cosmos ruled by the original sacrifice by Yemo. Manu being the first priest and ancestor of humankind, and Yemo being the first king and the god of death and the underworld. And Yemo's dismemberment and the transformation of his body parts into natural elements symbolize the creation of the cosmos and the cycle of life and death. And this myth reflects humanity's attempt to understand the origins of existence and the interconnectedness of all living beings. Now, going deeper into the Hindu god of death and justice, Yama, he's also known as Kala, and he's responsible for the dispensation of law and punishment of sinners. And he's often depicted as a dark-complexioned man riding a buffalo and carrying a noose or mace to capture souls. Where his dogs are meant to track down those who are about to die and also guard the path to Yama's realm. He has thus also been linked to the Greek Hades, who is the god of the dead and the king of the underworld, and the dog also being the most important animal for Hades, best known for his dog Cerberus. Now coming back to the Vedic myth, Yama, so Yemo, is the son of the thunder god, where Zagreus is a son of the thunder god, Zagreus being identified with Hades himself, and is known as Dionysus Zagreus, and is categorized as a dying and rising god. Next to this, the cult of Dionysus is also a cult of the souls. His maenads feed the dead through blood offerings, and he acts as a divine communicant between the living and the dead. Where within the Dionysian rites, his rituals connected to the sacred bull reenacted the creation of the cosmos and humanity by offering a bull as a sacrificial symbol. And this act was in its mysteries seen as a divine dismemberment of the god himself. Where death and dogs were also part of the Koryos, next to Dionysus Zagreus playing an important part with the Koryobantes, who are linked to the Koryos. Where Dionysus' flesh and blood consumed by his worshippers, symbolized the god infusing his very presence into his followers' bodies, imparting a portion of his divinity. And in the realm of Orphic myth, 7 titans attempted to dismember the infant god, and to evade them in some versions of the myth, Dionysus underwent a series of shape-shifting transformations with the final form of a young bull, where in the end they caught him, killed him, cut him up in pieces, and threw the pieces into a cauldron, where Zeus slew the titans and swallowed the still-throbbing heart of Zagreus, and in this manner he was born as Dionysus eventually, before venturing into the underworld to reunite with Zagreus and thus emerge as Yahus. As such, both Dionysus Zagreus and Yemo are connected to the underworld, overseeing the dead, connected to bovines next to reincarnation, if we would take the Orphic interpretation also into account. As such, Yama, Hades and Zagreus could be plausibly mythological counterparts to Yemu, representing the underworld, death, and the mysteries of life and rebirth, next to Dionysus Zagreus as much as Yemu being linked to kingship, as Dionysus Zagreus in myth was meant to take over from his father, the thunder god, yet died and was dismembered. Where the Koryos and Arkteia rituals next to the myth of Zagreus and the function of the sovereignty goddess can be interpreted as a symbolic resolution to the creation myth involving Yemu and Manu, where initially there was a sacrifice for social order. They provide a resolution to this process and allow for the balance of wholeness and authenticity versus social order. The sovereignty goddess also playing an important part within it next to the Koryos and Arkteia, and the winter solstice ritual, which was connected to a hero's gamos and death and rebirth within a sacred cave, bringing symbolically light into darkness. Another important figure that links both to the Koryos but also is a son of the thunder god is Péhunus. Péhunus, as a Proto-Indo-European pastoral god, is connected to guarding roads and herds, and his name means protector. It was also closely affiliated with goats or bucks, and in his later form as Pan, has goat legs, while goats are said to pull the car of Pushan. The animal was also sacrificed to him on occasion. Where it also should be noted that many of Pan's original attributes were transferred over to Hermes, the two of which were likely originally the same deity, so Péhunus. And he is the god of ways and byways, a guide on the journey, a protector of flocks, a watcher of who and what goes where, one who can scamper up any slope with ease of a goat. Regarding Pan, his cult was established in Greece in remote regions, likely making him originally a god of nature, farmers and shepherds. It is also possible that since the beginning he has been a deity with shamanic attributes linked to divination, reconciliation, magic, sacrifices and initiation, and the role of mediator between the worlds of the visible and invisible. In ancient Greek religion and mythology, Pan is the god of the wild, rustic music, and companion of the nymphs. And he's also recognized as the god of fields, groves, wooded glens, and is connected to fertility and the season of spring. Being a rustic god, Pan was not worshipped in temples or other built edifices, but in natural settings, usually caves or grottos. And his archaic father is Zeus, and a nymph named Hybris, who is his mother, where in the Roman sense, as Faunus, he played a role in the Lupercalia, together with the sovereignty goddess and the Koryos. But now coming to Trito and the Koryos. Well, Trito and the Koryos are also very much linked to Manu and Yemo. Trito being a significant figure in Proto-Indo-European mythology, representing the first warrior and acting as a culture hero. And he is recognized as the protagonist of the myth of the warrior function, establishing the model for all later men of arms. In the legend, Trito is offered cattle as a divine gift by celestial gods, which is later stolen by a three-headed serpent. Despite initial defeat, Trito, fortified by an intoxicating drink and aided by the storm god, goes into a cave where he battles the monster, after which he returns the recovered cattle to a priest for it to be properly sacrificed, which makes him now the first warrior, maintaining through his heroic deeds the cycle of mutual giving between gods and mortals. And this story of Trito served as a model for later cattle raiding epic myths, and most likely as a moral justification for the practice of raiding among Indo-European peoples. Trito in later myths also becomes the symbolic leader of the Koryos. The Koryos being a warrior band, composed of adolescent males, presumably from 12 to 13 up to 18 to 19 years of age, usually coming from prominent families and initiated together into manhood as an age class cohort. A big part of this was their mystical self-identification with wolves and dogs as symbols of death, lawlessness, and warrior fury. The idea of liminality between invulnerability and death on the one side and youth and adulthood on the other side being another important factor. After undergoing painful trials to enter the group, they were sent away to live as landless warriors in the wild from 4 to 9 years, within a group ranging from 2 to 12 members. The young males went without possession other than their weapons, living on the edges of their host society and being tasked with its protection. The Koryos were believed to be particularly active during the winter months, when the world was at its darkest and the forces of chaos and destruction were believed to be at their strongest. During this time, the Koryos would engage in various forms of ritual activity, including hunting, feasting, and dancing, as a way of invoking the powers of the gods and strengthening their own abilities. Another intriguing facet of the Koryos tradition is its potential connection to musical instruments reminiscent of the ancient Greek auskoulos, such as the bagpipe-like instruments created from the whole hides of sheep, goats, dogs, or cows. Additionally, there were flute-like instruments similar to the aulos, which originated in the Neolithic period, that were used by them as well. The Koryos further were seen as being closely connected to the gods and were believed to possess supernatural powers and abilities. They were dedicated to the thunder god, Péhunus, sovereignty goddess, and Yemo, renewing together with their leader Trito the initial sacrifice made by Yemo. Yet also through the help of the sovereignty goddess finding their way back towards wholeness, to have the ability to put on the wolf skin, but also knowing how to take it off, to be part of society, where symbolically the sword would be given to the sovereignty goddess, as she decided when to go to war. Yet, the sovereignty goddess would also be the figure who guided the young Koryos members back into society and into the whole, through a ritual like the Lupercalia, for instance. Yet, such an initiation rite was not just for men within Proto-Indo-European society, there also being such a rite for women, overseen by the goddess Hartorszá. Being the daughter of the thunder god and the sovereignty goddess. The reconstructed goddess Hartorszá was a goddess of the hunt, fertility, trees, groves, and wildlife, often connected to rivers and lakes, being also linked to the goddess Yami. In her more western form, she is associated with deer and is believed to be the precursor to the Celtic goddess Arkteia, the Greek Artemis, and the Roman goddess Diana, also linked thus to bears, where she is herself an emanation of the sovereignty goddess and as thus represents the figure who the hero is partnered with in the hero's gamos, or sacred marriage. She, like her mother, the sovereignty goddess, was linked to children and both oversaw the rite of passage of young girls, where bear figurines connected to her appear to have functioned as guides and companions for children in the afterlife, where the sovereignty goddess would look after these children. One good example of this goddess being Artemis, who is an ancient Greek goddess, embodying various roles and characteristics, including being associated with the moon, wild animals, and the hunt. As one of the 12 Olympian gods and goddesses, she was the daughter of Zeus and Leto, and the twin sister of Apollo. Artemis is often depicted as a huntress carrying a bow and arrows, and is revered for her protection of wild animals in the wilderness. She is also associated with childbirth, rivers and pools of water, and fertility. The Arkteia ritual was a sacred initiation ceremony held in honor of Artemis, primarily at the sanctuary of Brauron. Young girls aged 5 to 10 would take part of the Arkteia, where first they would receive environmental education, well, how we would see this in a more modern sense, where later as teens they would take part of a rite of passage, which involved embodying the characteristics of a bear through a sacred dance. The ritual symbolized the transition from childhood to adulthood and the awakening of feminine wisdom and strength. Participants wore a saffron robe called the krokotos, which symbolized their connection to the bear and their initiation into the mysteries of the feminine instinctual nature, where the shedding of the robe during the dance represented the shedding of their childhood persona, revealing their authentic selves. Former participants, known as amphipoloi, played a matronly role in supporting new participants, fostering a sense of community and shared identity among the young girls. The ritual served as a vivid personal experience, allowing participants to form bonds with their peers and gain confidence as they prepared to re-enter society as marriageable women. Artemis's association with wildlife conservation and ethical hunting practices is also reflected in the Arkteia ritual, which emphasized respect for nature and the interconnectedness of all living beings. In this sense, the ritual served as a means of environmental education, instilling values of reverence and stewardship for the natural world. There also being the divine twins and their sister, the dawn goddess as well. That are 3 other deities that I still want to go into. 2 of them being the divine twins. These horse twins are a set of twin brothers found throughout nearly every Indo-European pantheon, who usually have a name that means horse. In most traditions, the horse twins are brothers of the sun maiden or dawn goddess and the sons of the thunder god, who initially was the solar god, represented as young men, and the steeds who pulled the sun across the sky. The divine twins rode horses, sometimes they were even depicted as horses themselves, and rescued men from mortal peril in battle or at sea. The divine twins further embody the archetype of duality, representing opposing yet complementary aspects of the psyche. One twin is often depicted as a warrior, symbolizing assertiveness, strength, and the active principle, while the other twin embodies healing, nurturing, and domesticity, representing the passive principle. And this duality mirrors the psychological tension between opposing forces within the individual psyche. In most tales where they appear, the divine twins rescue the dawn from a watery peril, a theme that emerged from their role as the solar steeds. At night, the horses of the sun return to the east in a golden boat, where they traverse the sea to bring back the sun each morning. Where during the day, they cross the sky in pursuit of their consort, the morning star. As such, the divine twins are associated with the sun in its journey across the sky, symbolizing the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And their role as solar steeds, pulling the sun across the sky, reflects the Jungian concept of the self as a guiding principle of psychic wholeness and integration. Finally, in the Roman and Greek tradition, Castor and Pollux are also associated with sailors and protectors of travelers, while in the Celtic tradition, the Divine Brothers represent the cycles of life and death. The Proto-Indo-European Divine Twins are further also often linked to the celestial bodies of the morning and evening star, which are important in many mythologies and religions worldwide. Which also links to their sister H₂. An ancient epithet designating the dawn appears to have been Sky Daughter, and depicted as opening the gates of heaven when she appears at the beginning of the day. H₂ is generally seen as never aging or born again each morning. Associated with red or golden clothes, she's often portrayed as dancing. She's also linked to the goddess Eostre, which is the source for the name Easter, also seen as a goddess of spring, where she is in the ancient sense connected to Venus and the pouring of water, becoming the one to distribute the nectar of the gods. Where in ancient Greek mythology and religion, Eos is the goddess and personification of the dawn, who rose each morning from her home at the edge of the river Oceanus to deliver light and disperse the night. Like her Roman counterpart Aurora and Rigvedic Ushas, Eos continues the name of an earlier Indo-European dawn goddess, H₂. Eos, or her earlier Proto-Indo-European ancestor, also sharing several elements with the love goddess Aphrodite, perhaps signifying Eos's influence on her or otherwise a common origin for the two goddesses. From a Jungian lens, H₂ as the goddess of dawn embodies the archetype of renewal, rebirth, and the emergence of consciousness. Her appearance at the beginning of each day symbolizes the awakening of the psyche from the darkness of unconsciousness to the light of awareness, where in myth each day Eos drives her two-horse chariot, heralding the breaking of the new day and her brother's arrival. Thus, the most common epithet of the goddess in the Homeric epics is Rhododactylos, or rosy-fingered, a reference to the sky's color at dawn. Although primarily associated with the dawn and early morning, sometimes Eos would accompany Helios for the entire duration of his journey, and thus she's even seen during dusk. As such, she is also symbolized by the planet Venus, rising early in the morning, heralding the sun as the morning star, where she is also visible as the evening star. In ancient Mesopotamian mythology, the morning star was associated with the goddess Inanna, while the evening star was associated with the god Tammuz. And from a Jungian perspective, the dawn represents the ego's ascent into consciousness, while the evening star symbolizes its descent into the realm of the unconscious. But the Proto-Indo-European pantheon and spiritual beliefs were not just connected to particular deities, but also to nature spirits as well, as their beliefs grew out of an animistic base, and as such, nature spirits are a big part of that as well. And when it comes to spiritual beings such as nature spirits, spirits of place also played an important role. Spirits of place, often referred to as genii loci or noumena, are elemental entities deeply intertwined with specific geographical locations. And these beings embody the essence and character of their respective landscapes, imbuing them with a sense of presence and vitality. In many cultures around the world, the belief in spirits of place has been integral to understanding and interacting with the natural world. And spirits of place are believed to govern and protect their domains, influencing the land, weather patterns, and the well-being of the inhabitants. And they are often referred and honored through rituals, offerings, and acts of stewardship, as communities seek to maintain harmonious relationships with the environments they inhabit. And similarly, spirits of trees also held a significant place in Proto-Indo-European mythology as well. Trees were seen as sacred beings embodying wisdom, strength, and resilience. And the spirits dwelling within trees were believed to possess unique powers and knowledge, serving as guardians of the forest and intermediaries between the earthly realm and the spiritual world. And these tree spirits were often invoked for protection, guidance, and healing, with rituals and offerings made to honor their presence or seeking their favor. Next to this, also elves and nymphs playing an important role as well. Elves, known for their beauty, grace, and magical abilities, are often depicted as inhabitants of forests, mountains, or other secluded natural settings. And these beings are believed to possess a deep connection to nature and are referred as guardians of the wilderness. And in many cultures, elves are seen as protectors of the natural world, embodying the balance and harmony of the ecosystem. Where nymphs, on the other hand, are spirits associated with specific natural features such as rivers, springs, and groves. Where nymphs, similarly as spirits of place, embody the essence of their respective habitats, influencing their fertility, abundance, and vitality of the surrounding environment. Both elves and nymphs being revered for their roles as intermediaries between humans and the natural world. But generally, when it comes to these nature spirits, these beings were often associated with rituals celebrating the changing seasons, fertility rites, and ceremonies marking significant events in the natural world. Though also often displaying a very trickstery kind of nature, and as such could also be malevolent as well. And in an animistic sense, for the Proto-Indo-European people, but also in a more general animistic sense, ancestors also held a special place, representing a connection to the past and serving as guardians and guides for future generations, which you can still see to this day in certain shamanic and animistic cultures as well. The reverence for ancestors often manifests in rituals, ceremonies, and traditions aimed at honoring their memory and seeking their wisdom and blessings. And one powerful symbol of ancestral reverence for the Proto-Indo-European people is the burial mound. And these ancient structures, found in various forms across different cultures, serve as final resting places for the deceased and symbols of their return to the earth. And as such, burial mounds are not merely places for interment, but also sacred sites imbued with spiritual significance. And within the Proto-Indo-European frame of belief, the act of returning the deceased to the earth through burial is symbolic of the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. And as such, the burial mound is the doorway for the journey of the soul, as it transitions from the physical realm to the realm of the ancestors, and this aligns with beliefs in reincarnation, where the soul undergoes a series of births and deaths as a part of its spiritual evolution. Now, what I do want to say regarding all of these different facets of this pantheon that we went into, well, it really revealed the web of interconnectedness between all of these different facets. First of all, where themes of renewal, transformation, and the interplay between light and shadow also very much play an important role. From a goddess like Vesta to the thunder god, each of these deities embody particular qualities that are connected to the world at large. And also connected as well, from a Jungian lens to our own psyche as well. But it's not just connected to our psyche, but it's also as an archetypal energy embedded within the world around us as well. And with that, in a more larger sense, connected to the anima mundi as well, in the larger sense. But I really hope that this exploration can serve as a catalyst for further inquiry and understanding, to explore the mysteries of the divine and deepen one's connection to the natural world. Through such explorations, we may embrace both the wisdom of the ancient past, but also forge our own path towards wholeness. And with that said, I hope to see you all next time for another episode.